Welcome to today's webinar, How Messaging is Transforming Omni-Channel Customer Engagement, sponsored by Nuance. I'm Paula Bernier, your moderator. Our featured speakers today are Julie Osk of Forrester Research. She's a VP and Principal Analyst at the company, and Josephine Forage of Nuance Communications. She is Senior Product Marketing Manager of Digital Customer Engagement at Nuance. Julie, the floor is yours.
So mobile has changed consumer expectations. So what has changed? Consumers expect, first and foremost, they expect immediacy. Your gate has changed, your flight is canceled, you need to record your expenses on real time, and so forth. The second thing that consumers expect is simplicity, right? They want to use the camera to do things like image receipts or make check deposits. They expect content to be curated. So if I am in San Francisco and I do a search on pizza, I want local pizza places, not pizza in New York. And when consumers get on their mobile devices, they become very task-oriented. They want to get in, they want to get something done, and they want to get back out, and they expect it to be very quick. And then finally, on these mobile devices, consumers expect experiences to be highly contextual. They expect them to be time-sensitive notifications, relevant based on my past behavior, my preferences, or perhaps even messages that are triggered by location or some kind of an event. Maybe the alarm has been turned off at my home. Perhaps I've hit my goal for the day in terms of hitting 10,000 steps, whatever it may be. But these are the three primary ways that mobile has changed consumer expectations around immediacy, simplicity, and context. And all in, this is something that we call convenience. So as part of this convenience, messaging plays a really big role, and consumers depend very heavily on messaging. When we think about consumer interactions with mobile devices, they probably pick up their phones, according to a study done by Mary Meeker, 150 to 200 times a day. And of those times that we glance or pick up our phone to get something done, 60 to 75% of those instances are what we call micro moments, where it takes only a glance to get the information that I need. Sometimes that may be a news alert. It could be a reminder to take medication or that your next meeting is starting in a few minutes. Or it could be something where I take a digital action where I click on a link because I need to investigate potential fraud on my credit card, or I want to make some kind of a purchase, let's say, in an expiring auction. So the vast majority of interactions that brands have with their consumers are in micro moments, and apps are actually overkill for the vast majority of interactions that brands have. So when we think about why brands and why you want to use messaging, it's because consumers respond to messaging. When we ask consumers, what action did you take the last time you received a notification? First of all, 57% took some kind of action after receipt, right? 51% read it, opened it, and looked and took action within the app. 22% read it and took action offline, and 14% read it and replied without a notification, right? And there's a lot of those that you do. Even if I read it and ignore it, it's almost as if that's still an effective notification because, for example, if you're paying attention to the news today, the former director of the FBI is testifying, I've probably had 18 notifications today. I don't do anything with them. Technically, I'm ignoring them, but I'm still reading them. Very few of these are discarded entirely. But as part of doing messaging and what makes messaging effective is, as I said with mobile, there has to be this element of immediacy. Consumers demand immediacy. And if you look at what they want, is on one hand, they basically, at the top of the list, they want to stay informed, like timely information, alerted about emergencies, keeping up to date with family and friends and news. And they even 41% of them want to receive deals. So messaging is really key to engaging with consumers. And I would offer to you that messaging and chatbots and conversations are even harder to execute on than applications because they have to be so relevant and they have to deliver the simplicity to consumers. So when we think about the opportunities with messaging, messaging offers engagement opportunities throughout the customer journey. Traditionally, and I'd say more historically, and when I say historically, I mean over the past 10 or 15 years, a lot of messaging has been used to do marketing, drive brand awareness and acquisition, and doing what we call manufactured moments where brands create some net new opportunity to discuss, to engage with consumers, or they do things like borrow mobile moments like placing advertising or placing messages on third-party sites. But the really, really big impact when it comes to mobile messaging is engaging with your existing consumers in the buy, use, ask, and engage phase. If you think back to how I said mobile changes consumer expectations, it has to do with that context and that relevancy, and you don't tend to know much about consumers that aren't your customers. And so the really big opportunities are certainly in the lower funnel, whether you're selling them a product and helping them use that product and get better outcomes from that product, helping them when you realize that they're stuck within an app or having a problem with a product, and even things like loyalty and so forth. So the opportunities are throughout the funnel. It's not just really about marketing. So while the opportunity is there to use messaging to drive engagement with consumers, there's still some challenges. So at the top of the list is that a minority of enterprises aspire to transform customer experiences with mobile, let alone can. So when we do an annual survey of Fortune 500 companies in the U.S. and Europe and Asia, and we talk to them about philosophically what they want to do in mobile, and few enterprises actually aspire to transform experiences. A lot of companies, 32%, are still doing what we call shrink and squeeze, where they're taking the same experience from the desktop and trying to put it onto a small phone, and that's fundamentally flawed because it assumes that consumers have the same needs and motivations on the go as they do on the desktop, which can be very, very different depending on what industry you're in. About half of companies aspire to be mobile first, where they try to make an experience in the physical environment better, or they're creating some kind of net new services on the phone. But then only 17% are looking to transform a customer experience with mobile, where they think about doing ethnographic research or consumer journey mapping to really think about how can we make an experience better by delivering timely information, especially to consumers through notifications. And while 17% aspire to transform experiences with mobile, only 7% can. And I often use this analogy of the canyon because when we talk to consumers about when we talk to companies about what it takes to transform an experience, their eyes just glaze over, and it's like the idea of trying to cross this canyon where you're saying, well, what are the road signs? What's the path? How do I get there? Like, who do I follow? And there just aren't that many examples. So if you're feeling that way, you're in good company because only about 7% of companies that we survey have the budget and the technology and the talent to actually get this done. So let's pause now for a polling question.
Great. Thanks so much, Julie. So we're going to have a couple poll questions during today's presentation, and here's the first one. The question is, what are your plans for investing in messaging in the next 12 months? And your choices are no plans, you're interested, are you evaluating or researching, are you in the pilot proof of concept stage, are you implementing or expanding? And as Julie said, I'm editor of Customer Magazine at TMC. A lot of the themes she talks about dovetail with what we're seeing in the market as well, what we've been covering lately, the short attention span of customers, mobility, the focus on customer experience, and personalization as well. So let's take a look at what the poll results are here. So the poll results are no plans, 16 to 12.1%. It looks like up to 18% are interested, 46% are evaluating, and down the line. Julie, did you want to comment on that?
I think one of the things that you see here is that a lot of companies have experience, let's say, with email, and they're very comfortable with that as a communication medium to engage with consumers. It's well understood. They have a staff that understands that well. But when you think about messaging, I think a lot of times people underestimate the complexity of it, and then once they get into it and they start thinking about, implementing it or piloting it or evaluating it, as you see where a lot of folks are here, they realize how hard it is. And I think it's even harder to execute on messaging than it is on using applications. And I think as companies go forward, and one of the things we'll talk about later in the presentation is that a lot of brands, unless you're a bank, are really struggling to get consumers to come to your app or come to your website, and you're struggling to get the level of engagement that you want in these digital medium. And messaging is one of the opportunities that brands have to proactively drive that engagement by anticipating the needs of consumers, which on one hand is very hard to execute on, and secondly, I think brands tend to become more interested when let's say the usage of their apps or their websites begins to plateau, and they start thinking about, okay, like what's next? How do I drive that engagement?
Okay, great. Julie, the floor is yours.
Okay. All right, so let's talk about the second challenge. So the second challenge we see is that too few enterprises tap into messaging as a channel. So I go back to this executive survey that we said, where I said few enterprises make regular use of messaging. And so what you see if you look more, well, first of all, what I'll tell you what the chart is, the dark green is used regularly, yellow is piloting, and gray is planned to use or test later this year. And here you can see that like older technologies like SMS and push notifications have the highest adoption at just over 1/3 of companies, but just a handful are piloting or planning to use that technology later this year. Certainly SMS has been around a long time. Some of the challenges or the inhibitors associated with SMS can be around the cost of doing SMS because you're paying on a per message basis, and then use of push notifications tends to be inhibited by either one, not many of my consumers have downloaded my app, and that's a precondition. Two, I need to get folks to opt into these services, and then three, I've got to have very, very good reasons or contextual information to proactively push out information to my consumers. And then you can work down the line to things like in-app messaging and messaging in third-party platforms and things like web push. And primarily the reason the numbers are lower here on the left-hand side of the curve is that these are relatively new technologies. Something like web push has only been around the past year to 18 months, and it doesn't necessarily work across every platform with every browser. So we're still really, from my point of view, given how important messaging is still very early days. So the third thing is most do not use context to make these messages relevant. If you remember, I said immediacy, simplicity, and context are the three most important things when it comes to mobile, yet only 1/3 of companies that we survey actually use location or some kind of context to make their services more relevant. And sometimes when I'm talking about this theme, what I do is I show folks the home screen of my phone, and the fact that I've got almost 25,000, I think it's up to 65,000 personal emails I haven't read, 5,000 work emails, probably 10 at this point that I haven't read. But then when you look at things like Facebook and Slack and WhatsApp that are more relevant to me because there's context. I've opted into these folks. They're my friends. They're my family. And Slack, it's a collaboration platform amongst a select group of colleagues, and things that are very relevant to me. Then I engage with those platforms, but times have changed, and consumers don't want untargeted messages blasted out at them. So context becomes very important. So number 4, I alluded to this earlier, but brands really face an uphill battle to own their customers' mobile moments. If I reference back to that 200 mobile moments that we spoke about when I spoke about the 150 to 200 mobile moments per day, and we think about these as a representation of that 200, and then we look at what retail owns, what travel owns, and what banking owns, you can see that they own relatively small share of these overall 200 mobile moments a day. There's an arms race going on for these moments, and it tends to be the Facebook and the Googles and the Apples of the world that own most of your customers' time. And so brands are really battling here to get mind share with consumers on their mobile devices. So number 5, consumers spend most of their time in just a few apps. If I just give an example of all of the apps, I probably have over 200 apps on my phone. Statistically, consumers only use 30 apps in a given month, and they spend 85 to 88% of their time in just 5 apps. So my 5 may be different than your 5, but the bottom line is our time is consolidated, and it continues to consolidate. Consumers were spending 84% of their time in just 5 apps a couple of years ago, and now it's 88% of their time in just 5 apps. So brands have really got an uphill battle. And then when you think about where consumers are spending their time, it doesn't tend to be in commerce-related activities. It tends to be just general browsing, movies, things like instant messaging and chat, playing games, navigation, listening to music. doing a little bit of shopping and broader activities, utilities for work, sending email, checking things like weather and news, productivity apps for work, and books and so forth. But overall, 11 categories get 84% of all of consumers' time on mobile devices. So the breadth of things that we do, even though, like, let's say there may be, 500,000 games in the Apple App Store, only 11 categories broadly get our time on mobile devices. The sixth challenge that brands face is that third parties know more about their customers than they do. Certainly if you're a retailer and you've got some kind of a ID system in place, like a loyalty program or email addresses or phone numbers, you know what your customers are spending. But third parties like Google and Facebook, Apple less so because they're really protective of consumer privacy, but Amazon know a lot about your customers. So there's this absolute battle going on to own my wallet, my virtual assistant, my map search, calendar, commerce, etc., because brands are really trying to disintermediate brands from their consumers. Google knows more about our day-to-day lives than anyone else does because it has our email and calendar and maps and our search. Amazon knows more about what we buy. Apple knows a lot about the media that we consume, and so you really have to understand that this is a really fierce battle going on, and that's why there's so much of a push by Apple and Google and more, let's say, to own the wallet within the consumer's pocket. Number 7 on the list, too many do what we call old things in new ways rather than doing new things. So if we think about how marketers have traditionally approached communicating with consumers, they do segmentations, targeting, campaigns, media schedules, and then they drive things based on the needs of the business. So in this scenario, I'm just a middle-aged woman living in San Francisco, and if they want to target me, it tends to be driven by their needs. Like, oh, we have new product. We need to get rid of inventory. There's a back-to-school sale. We're trying to hit a revenue number for the holidays. I'm a bank, and I'm trying to upsell customers to more products. But those are needs of the business. Mobile's all about being on the consumer's time and what I need as an individual. So if you think back to the home screen of my phone, it's really about what I need, when I need it, and engaging with me as an individual and as Julie, not as a middle-aged woman who lives in San Francisco. And I think this is a very hard, philosophical step for a lot of companies to make. So number 8, brands are experimenting with conversational platforms. So let's stop there before we look at the results from our survey.
Thanks so much, Julie. So this is our second and final poll. The question is, as you should be able to see, what are your plans for investing in conversational technologies in the next 12 months? And as you should be able to see, the answers are chatbot, third-party platform, branded apps, and voice-enabled speakers. If you could weigh in right now, that would be great. And while we're waiting for those results to come in, I should mention that at the end of the presentation today, we'll have a brief Q&A. You can input your questions in the platform, and I'll ask those questions during about the last 5-10 minutes. So let's see what we have here. Okay, the results are up. Julie, go ahead. Thanks.
All right, so what we see is about half of companies are interested in chatbots, and then there's a little bit of interest in putting chat into branded apps or voice-enabled speakers. So one of the things I would comment on, we're going to show you some data, and our data from the Fortune 500 looks a little bit different than this. And I think this is one of those things because so many companies are piloting in this, the numbers tend to move around and kind of what's hot can change, not from month to month, but every few months what's hot can change. But using third-party platforms is actually easier and more accessible to most brands than doing things like chatbots or using voice-enabled speakers, because those technologies and using a machine to interact with the consumer, you really have to narrow down the use case and think through what the possibilities are, because those aren't very open-ended systems today that deliver great experiences. They're interesting, they're fun to pilot, but they're not delivering a lot of results today. So it surprises me a little bit that we're not seeing more with use of third-party platforms, and we're seeing a lot of focus on companies looking to automate their interaction with consumers. So what you can see from our results is you can see that actually the highest adoption from what we measured about 6 to 9 months ago is 16% of enterprises are using third-party messaging platforms. And then when you look at what I would call more of the automated or a human engaging with the machine, so the voice-based assistants, bots, or things like voice integration, the adoption level is relatively low among enterprises, with even, just certainly more are piloting or planning to pilot, but most companies don't have the architecture to do this. They don't have the talent internally to think about conversations, right? They don't have copywriters, so to speak, that are writing these dialogues. And a lot of companies are struggling just to do the basics with mobile. So doing things that are even harder than applications or websites, or even harder than messaging, I would offer, tend to get pushed out because they're hard to execute on. All right, so number 9 on my list is companies, they fail to live up to their promises even when they do put things like chatbots and use third-party messengers. So one of the exercises that we went through is Forrester did a benchmark of 120 commerce-oriented companies in the Fortune 500 within the United States. And what we found is that less than 10% have a chatbot. So that's very, fairly consistent with the data that's on the previous slide that was collected about 3 months earlier than this study was done. Quite a few make sense. They don't have a messenger presence. And as you can see here, the adoption of what I would call the Facebook Messenger, or like a Facebook Messenger-like platform where it's a human-to-human conversation, has the highest adoption. The challenge is while companies, very much like the early days of email, were setting expectations of I'll get back to you within a few minutes, within an hour, within a half a day, a lot of companies just failed to meet the expectations of responding to consumers, and 19% didn't respond at all. I would tell you, I had one experience within a branded app with a chatbot, and they told me my wait time was 246 minutes to talk to a human if that's something that I wanted to do, right, which is obviously crazy. And then finally, brands don't pursue technology strategically. We hear a lot of, like back in 2008, 2009, it was let's build an app. Now it's let's build a chatbot, let's do something on Facebook Messenger. But these are technology decisions, and that's the wrong place to start. You need to first figure out, what you want to do and who you want to target before you really think about what the technology is. So let's transition now to, what should brands do? We've talked about a lot of the challenges, but how do you begin to take those steps forward? So the first one is, and this is going to tie back to challenge number 10, is create a strategy. Don't just jump to technology decisions. So at Forrester, we think about this thing called the POST methodology because it really offers a systematic approach to thinking about mobile experiences or strategy. The first thing that you want to do is think about people and review the mobile technology and the devices and the services profiles of your target audience. If you want to target millennials, Facebook Messenger is probably not going to be the place to do it. If you want to target what we call those in their golden years, older than 70 or 75, it's probably still going to be on the phone. So you really need to think about who you're going to target as your first step, and then how do they use technology and services. Secondly, decide on your goals. Is it customer service? Is it brand awareness? Are you trying to make engaging with your brand more convenient for consumers? What is it? Number 3, decide your strategy. Determine your approach to meet your objectives. Like, what is it that you want to offer? Do you want to give people the opportunity to check a bank balance, book a flight, check flight times, make purchases, request information about a product that I've already purchased? What is it? And really think about what it is that you want to offer before you make the final decision, which is technology, where you think about choosing the technologies that will enable you to implement your strategy. So whether it's a chatbot, it's a conversational interface, it's some kind of push notification, doesn't matter if it's SMS or it's push or it's in-app, those are the last set of decisions that you want to make after you already know what you want to do, for what reason, and for whom. And it's very important to be methodical about this. So the second thing I would offer is you need to really think about setting yourself up for success by choosing appropriate technologies and choosing appropriate use cases for the technology. When we think about chatbots, for example, they're fairly limited in what they can do today. A lot of the successful examples today are things like content delivery, looking up basic information like, what time is my flight, when is a package going to arrive, things that are fairly straightforward. And then once you get into more difficult use cases where it becomes more consultative, it's more open-ended questions, it's more back and forth, certainly I can do that with a customer service agent today over text like I might do with voice or with someone in the store, but chatbots can't do everything today. But certainly over time, as natural language understanding and processing improves, computer vision improves, machine learning improves, chips on phones get faster and so forth, what's possible through automation or with a chatbot-like experience is going to grow and expand over time. If we look at the state of things today, I think Domino's offers a good example. They have a fairly controlled experience here. They don't try to do everything. They set themselves up for success by offering simple use cases, whether it's ordering my favorite pizza or something I've ordered before, checking the status of a delivery, has it left the shop, when is it going to arrive. It tackles what seems like a very simple use case, but they're brilliant in that they create an experience that the technology is capable of supporting and delivering a great experience. Amex also uses push notifications within contextual conversations to give me new ideas. This is a bit promotional in nature when it reaches out to me and says, hey, I'm the Amex bot for Messenger. But one of the things they're using it for is marketing. Notifications are showing the user new features. Once the consumer is stuck, they do offer the opportunity to move into what I call a hybrid mode where I can talk to a customer agent. And then they also use context to extend the conversation. Because let's say I buy plane tickets with American Express, they know I have an upcoming trip, and they're reaching out to me to see if they could sell additional services or if I need additional help with that trip that's coming up. And then finally, brands must find ways to elevate when requested or questions are not understood. And so here you can see I was ordering flowers for my grandmother back on Valentine's Day, and I had an issue of I had put in the wrong zip code, and then I wanted to talk to someone, and they were unable to understand what I wanted, and then eventually moved me over to a customer service agent. So number 3, I talked about how messaging is much harder than applications is because applications are very static experiences, whereas mobile messaging is a very dynamic experience. So let me tell you what I mean by that and why it's harder. So when we think about identifying your customers' mobile moments, we talk about using something that Forrester calls the idea cycle to identify your customers' mobile moments in context. So the first step is to identify those mobile moments. So you do some kind of ethnographic research, do some journey mapping to really understand, where are the pain points? Where is my customer unhappy? Where are they stressed out? Where is their anxiety? Where isn't the satisfaction as high as it should be? And then think about, could the immediacy and simplicity of mobile, and especially that you get through messaging because it is so immediate and it needs to be so contextual, could that help to make the experience better? Then you design the mobile engagement. So that's about the post methodology and choosing the right technologies and the right scenarios for the right technologies. Finally, engineering your platforms, your processes, and your people for mobile. You can't just change digital if it has an impact on your physical locations. For example, if I were Starbucks, I could put in place a chatbot to allow me to place an order in the morning, but that doesn't work unless there's all this back-end integration that goes into the store such that my iced tea is ready for me when I walk in, or that the people understand that there's a new way of ordering and consumers may need to be treated differently, right? Or people need to work differently within the Starbucks. So there's a lot that happens on the back end there with your technology solutions and partners, and that's where the heavy lifting is. And then finally, you have to analyze results to monitor the performance and optimize the outcomes. And when we talk about this, we talk about focusing less on what I would call the business outcomes and more on what I would call consumer-centric outcomes. Is the consumer getting what they need? Are they getting things done faster? Is it more convenient for them? And then certainly with chatbots, conversational interfaces, and messaging, all of the kind of that whole bucket of technologies, you always want to start small with a platform and then extend. It's because you're constantly testing what's working, what's not working, where am I getting traction, and then extending that. So if we think about a graphical representation of using this journey mapping or ethnographic research, you map out the journey. You find those moments of truth that you have with your customers, and then think about the context around them, right? Messaging is a lot about using context to anticipate what my customer needs, what's their motivation in that moment, and proactively reaching out to them. Messaging, whether in the form of notifications or chatbots, can also be reactive, but it can also be a very proactive opportunity to surprise and delight your customers by anticipating what they need. Because by looking at the motivations that they have on the go. Because when we think about mobile, it's really about focusing on those needs and motivations that consumers have on the go, whether they're late, a flight is canceled, or they need transportation. You want to tap into and address consumer needs directly by targeting exactly what that need is. Say, in contrast, so many web services are set up by exposing what the back-end systems are. So that if I'm an airline, for example, continuing on this example, they're just exposing their back-end reservation system, their back-end loyalty system, their back-end flight status system, to the consumers, and they're just they're creating a product less than an experience. And so if we think back, I go back a slide here, but that's not what consumers need. Consumers have needs. It's not that they want a product, they want a problem solved for them. And messaging is able to do that, but you have to think very differently about how you go about designing those experiences. So with that, let me pause and hand it back to Nuance.
Thank you so much, Julie. These were some amazing insights, and it's incredible to see how the world of engagement moves and how mobile becomes more and more important in the everyday world. And Julie talked about the effect that if you have a hype like messaging is at the moment, then it is dangerous to just jump on it and not think about it like, what do you want as a brand? What do your customers want? And think about like your overall, the bigger picture first before starting to think about technology. But once you walk through that experience and walk through the decision on what channels, what engagement options are important for you, it is also important to understand what is available out there, to understand the technology, the user experience in those new hype channels in order to make the right decision and to then create an actually good user experience. And messaging, as new as it is also challenging because it's not a user experience that we are used to. Before there was chat on your website or chat on your mobile browser, those kind of things, and you were able to design the experience on your own. So you could create the experience first and then could create the content. Now you're presented with their own platform. So Facebook Messenger, for example, it's the Facebook platform, and now you have to change the thinking about how do I present the content in those different types of platforms. Also, there are different types of conversation options in there. You have the real-time, the immediate back and forth, and then you have an asynchronous, which is the new way of messaging, the asynchronous options to communicate with your customers. So, and both have their advantages. It really depends on your unique business needs, what you want as a business, what your customers want. And then you can use real time in order to support the immediacy that the customers want. And then you can use asynchronous to enable responses at any time. Basically, asynchronous allows you to answer whenever, a day later, an hour later, and still be in context of the conversation. So it is really important to understand what you and your customers need in this specific situation. And all of those messaging channels, they have their own advantage. Obviously, they have their own user experience. They come with their own expectations, but they are all specific to a purpose. So for SMS, for example, is native. It's one of the oldest messaging channels out there. It's simple to use. It's available on every phone. It's just the user types in a message to the phone number they already have or they see somewhere on a billboard and then can just start the communication. In-app or branded apps are usually enterprise-owned, so this is actually an experience that you design. It has a purpose, so Julie just talked about like how people are using just very specific apps on their day-to-day basis. So the app that they are using has to have a purpose. It has to have all the information they want in there. Think about banking apps or telco apps, where you have all the information about your account, all the information. If you want to transfer money, you can do that directly in there. And then it has to be convenient to connect with the brand if the information is not available at that time. And that's why messaging apps are becoming popular more and more, because versus apps where you have to have one app per brand, on messaging you have all the brands within the app. So on messaging platforms, consumers have everything in one place. So for example, I use it if I go shopping, instead of the brand letting me send emails so that I have like 10 emails per order process and per shipping notification and whatever, I just have my Facebook Messenger app and I have the communication with the brand directly in there all in once and not 10 emails in my email app. Something that might not be considered messaging like at the first thought are IoT devices, and especially voice-enabled speakers like Amazon Echo and the Google Home or the new Apple one, the HomePod, but they're meeting the need of the customer. So just if you think about you're sitting relaxed on your couch, you're seeing maybe it, and you're wondering, do I have enough money to spend on this specific product that I'm seeing here on TV? Instead of picking up your phone, typing in your PIN number, finding the app of your bank, opening the app, authenticating in your app, and then find the information you're looking for, you can just say, hey Alexa, what's my bank status? So it's much easier, much more convenient for the consumer to use those in their moment of need. So, but again, I'm not saying that every brand should use or should implement every of those channels into their omni-channel strategy. It is really important on what is your need, where are your customers, what are they using, and then depending on what type of use cases you want to present, then you use the channel that makes the most sense for you. But again, it is, as Julie talked about all those hypes, it is really important to think about not just jumping onto the hype and creating a siloed omni-channel, but thinking about how to implement those into the bigger picture. So instead of having a situation where a customer connects on Facebook Messenger, asks a question, and Facebook Messenger is a good example because it is a huge hype right now, and then comes back a couple of days later, opens the app because they wanted to look at their invoice for something, and then continue the conversation inside the app, that the chat agent, who is your brand representative in that moment, has no clue what happened on Facebook Messenger before. So we don't want to create those kind of situations. Also, that asynchronous is taken too far. So yes, it allows you to answer at any later time and will always be in context, but just because the technology allows you to do that doesn't mean you should do that. From a customer perspective, they connect with you because they have to in that moment. Usually they don't want to talk to you, but they have to in that situation because they have a time-critical issue maybe, so they want an answer immediately. They don't want to wait for the brand 10, 15 minutes to come back with the answer. So yes, offering that for the customer to answer at any time later on, but from a brand perspective, it is more important to meet the immediacy of the customer, to answer immediately to their question and to solve the problem that they have. Also, when you think about messaging, don't take it into channels where it actually doesn't belong. For example, on a website, if you're logged into an account, you see, in this example, a bank account, you see an issue with one of the charges, and if there is a chat presented to you, you are expecting someone on the other end that is there for you to help you in this moment. But if you then get some cryptic system messages about, well, we are leveraging messaging now and you can continue with your day, you're sitting there wondering, well, what? I don't get that connection between I'm sitting in front of my desktop computer, what does messaging have to do with it? And then you're sitting there waiting for the chat agent, but instead of the agent, you're just getting your inactive message and you have to click in order to continue. So that much with continuing with your day. So it is important to think about designing the right experience for the right channel and not just take a new hype and put it into everything you already have. We just think that these all are experiences that your customers shouldn't experience, and that's why we are proposing a better world, or the ideal world for messaging, where messaging is part of the overall omni-channel strategy. Also, if it is part of your omni-channel for the seamless customer experience, you have the ability to move your customers from one channel to another. Think about Facebook Messenger again. You start the conversation and then you realize, oh, you want to show them something specific. You maybe want to co-browse with them, something that this platform doesn't offer. So you have to have a way to move them for the customer in an effortless way to your branded channel, to your website, mobile or desktop, in order to have those opportunities there. And if you force your customer to like, oh, please go to that website and then connect with us again, ask for chat agent, I don't know what's the name, but that is not a good experience. They should have it as easy and as simple as possible to move between those channels. So also, again, just because a technology allows it doesn't mean you should enable these features. From a brand perspective, it is important to treat every incoming message the same, not just on your messaging channels, but in general. If you think about the Omni-Channel, you want that immediate connection with your customer. You want to solve their issue. You want to keep them happy so they stay your customer. But allow them, so from a customer perspective, allow them to continue the conversation on their terms so they can connect with you whenever later they have the time. Sometimes they just have to stop, their life continues too, but then they have to be able to connect with you at any time later on. So, and it's not just industry data that tells you that customers want this immediacy. We looked at our own data. We looked at our own conversations that we have, the millions that we have with our customers, and we found something very interesting, actually, which matches perfectly what the industry data shows that Julie just presented. Is when you look at the chart, you see at the bottom the time passing till an agent responds, and the longer the agent needs to respond to the customer issue, the more the customer satisfaction goes down. So we see that on average, if the agent responds within 30 seconds, the customer satisfaction is on a good level. Everything later is really bad. And that is for desktop and mobile, pretty much the same. Mobile is just a little bit more, but the customer doesn't allow you a longer time just because they're on a mobile device. They still expect the immediate answer within actually 36 seconds. And this is something, if you think about messaging as the bigger picture, as part of your Omni-Channel strategy, and if you include messaging, no matter if it's like a real-time or an asynchronous way of communicating, if you include it into an Omni-Channel platform that leverages artificial intelligence for smarter routing, that leverages automated and human-assisted engagement, that has one unified reporting so you get insights from all your communications, and then you can use those insights to continuously optimize the engagement further on, to really create this ongoing, basically, loop between engagement, insight, and then you put the information back in to optimize those, you will create a really great customer experience for all of your customers in messaging channels and in all other channels. So we understand that if you have a contact center, it doesn't make sense always to have human agents there. They are busy, they are out of the office. Maybe you don't staff your contact center 24/7. So you want to have someone who helps with these immediate responses. So that's why it is good to have a mix of virtual assistants and humans to create this immediacy, to create those immediate engagements for your customers. So no matter if you use the virtual assistant just to collect the data up front and then to route to the right agent, or if you use your virtual assistant to really have a conversation back and forth and try to solve the issue directly with the virtual assistant, it should be easy. No matter if there is a situation where you need to escalate to a live chat agent, this escalation should then be seamless. Both the virtual assistant and the human agent then need, obviously, access to the same data, to the same information about the customer, to the conversation history, so they get the context to create this seamless engagement for your consumer. That also helps if your customer then comes back at a later point, maybe even through a different channel, that both the virtual assistant and the human agent can then access that information and can continue in context. So even if it's a few days later and they say like, hey, I know we talked about that like a few days ago, is that still the same issue that you have now? It just helps the customer feel valued, feel understood from you, from the brand. And obviously that has to be true for all messaging channels. So no matter if it's a text-based or voice-based experience, you have to present the information, the answers the same way. And in order to do that, the technology needs to allow you to create that experience once and then just connect to any channel, and the technology takes care of presenting the information in a channel appropriate way. So if you think about hyperlinks, for example, obviously a hyperlink on a speaker wouldn't make any sense on an app or on-site Facebook Messenger. It would. So there has to be, the technology has to understand how things have to be presented differently in certain situations. And also, not just messaging, but really the bigger picture of the Omni-Channel. So even if you think about your IVR, about social channels, or about other platforms that you might integrate through APIs, it has to be easy for you as the brand. It has to be kind of efficient for you as the brand to create those experiences with one platform. So that's why we're proposing our best practice. What is the easiest way to create the seamless user experience by using an omni-channel engagement platform? It is always good to start the conversation with a virtual assistant. Nina is Nuance virtual assistant. So if you start your conversation with Nina, you have the immediate response for your customer. And then depending on how you deploy her, you can, again, either just have her for collecting data or for solving complex issues directly on the spot. You should always have, just in case, a seamless escalation path. So you don't have the situation with, oh, I don't understand, and then just leave the customer alone and try to let them figure it out on their own. Or worse, even let them call into a more expensive channel. Have a seamless escalation path inside the same channel with the same user experience, including the whole context of the conversation that the human agent can take over. And then if the customer comes back at any later point, route new messages appropriately. So if the conversation still was happening with Nina with the virtual assistant, continue that conversation. She has to be able to connect the dots from past conversations with what is happening right now, or if the conversation was already happening with the live agent, routed to that same live agent or at least the same agent group so they can continue the conversation. So, and why we think it is important to have the combination of human and virtual assistant is because Julie shared her experience. There are just problems with simple chatbots right now. They don't understand everything. They run into issues, and it just happens. So there's nothing you can really do about it. But what you can do is having that seamless escalation part, creating the seamless experience for the customer, reduce the frustration for them, and keep them happy so they stay your customers over time. So the combination of both really delivers the best business results for you. And obviously, we at Nuance, we are helping you to achieve those benefits because our omni-channel engagement platform is enterprise ready. We have the features, we have the artificial intelligence in there that helps creating, that takes care of like seamless routing of intelligence that helps to create those experiences, and that helps delighting your customers by combining traditional channels like IVR, et cetera, with those new messaging channels. So you will see the reduced operating costs. You will see the increased customer satisfaction by using our platform. If you're interested in more about what we can do, we have some videos and some articles here. We will send out the deck later, so you will have the links to those information in the deck that we send out later, and then you can look through more information and read through more what we are capable of. And now back to Paula.
Thanks, Josephine. Great presentations, Josephine and Julie. Okay, now we'll get into the audience Q&A. And here's the first question. Julie, let's start with you on this one. Julie, is there a point at which message saturation can occur?
Yes, but that comes with a lot of caveats. If you are a marketer and you're bombarding your customer with like untargeted, you're doing segmentations, you're doing what we call old things in new ways, yeah, you're going to saturate your customer. But let me give you an example at the other extreme. If you live in the Midwest and a tornado is coming towards your home, you'd be happy to get an update like every 10 seconds about where that tornado is. If my flight is delayed and I'm at risk of, let's say, missing my connecting flight, I'm happy to get as many updates as I need to stay informed, to make good decisions, and to reduce my anxiety. So it's not like a fixed number. It's very situational or very contextual in terms of saturation. But using messaging for marketing purposes, upper funnel, you're most at risk.
Okay, and here's a second audience question. Would you recommend storing the different customer interactions in the CRM in order to associate them with the customer profile, or is it stored at the messaging service level and there's an integration between the CRM and the messaging service to retrieve conversations? I'm not sure.
Yeah, so I don't know if Nuance wants to take this one first or not, but certainly Forrester recommends integration of what we call systems of insight with systems of engagement, because the triggers and the ability to ingest real-time information or context to trigger messages becomes so important with messaging. And so whether it's stored in a CRM or however it's done, it has to, or if it's done, because every one of these like systems of engagement and systems of insights that are sold by, let's say, a messaging vendor also tends to have a CRM component or integration with CRM. And however it works, it has to be fast. This isn't about batch messaging. This is about real time.
Yeah, I totally agree with Julie on that one. So it has to be simple to integrate, right? So the APIs have to be there and that you can leverage all the information from both systems back and forth. And then the connection has to be fast, and it has to be simple for both the virtual assistant and the chat agent to read through this information. So it doesn't help if a chat agent, has an agent interface that is full of information and that they have to read through basically a book in order to get the information they want. It's important that the system then is able to pull the important information out of the CRM or to use the information it's stored on its own and present that to the chat agent in a way they can use it to have that seamless conversation, to have the fast response, and not send a message like, oh, wait, give me a second, I have to read through all your past conversation before I can start answering you. So, yeah.
Okay, Josephine, it sounds like this next question is for you because you talked a bit about asynchronous messaging during your presentation. And here's the question. What is the standard response time for asynchronous messaging in different industries and contexts? And can you provide an idea of turnaround times that consumers want and expect?
Well, I think that depends really on the use case and on the industry, but in general, so asynchronous or not, I think it is really important to have that immediate response because the customer can always come back later. I think things like Facebook Messenger in-app are good examples because they send out notifications, so your phone is able to send out a notification, but it is important for the customer to see, okay, they get an immediate answer. So even if they send the message before they get in the car, put their phone aside, and then look at the answer when they get out of the car, it has to be there. Or if it's an immediate time-sensitive issue, they are sitting on their phone. They are not putting it away. They are waiting for the brand to answer. They are looking at the 3 dots that are popping up and are waiting for the brand to answer immediately. So no matter if the technology enables asynchronous, it should be, from a brand perspective, always an immediate answer to take care of those time-sensitive issues especially.
Okay, and it looks like this is our last question. Julie, why don't we start with you on this, and Josephine, then if you have something to add, that would be great. And the question is, do you see a voice-automated agent as increasingly or decreasingly important in the future?
So voice will be increasingly important, in large part because so many more devices that we have won't have screens, right? So a lot of us spend time on a smartphone today, but more and more, whether it's a speaker, something in my car, turning on and off lights in my home, there'll be more and more interfaces that don't have a screen, and then, voice will be more important. Text and screens never go away, and I don't think voice is going to dominate here over the next 5 years or so, but there'll be increasing use of it, both because of the use case scenarios as well as consumer familiarity with it.
Yeah, again, I agree. So yeah, voice is definitely, because it's just more intuitive to use. It is easier to speak to someone and express what you want via voice than texting. It's just simpler and more native, natural to what you're doing. And I think also the technology developments, if you think about something like, for example, WebRTC that includes voice and digital channels, the technology is just moving towards the direction. Everything becomes more digital, but no matter if it's text or voice-based, it will still be there.
Great. Well, it looks like we're out of time. If the audience members could please complete our survey, we would greatly appreciate it. This webinar will be available on demand starting later in the week. Look for an email from us providing details, and feel free to share that email with your colleagues who may be interested. Thanks again for joining us today. Thanks again to our presenters and to our sponsor, Nuance. Have a great day.